Hey, I am Bradford Howe, and I am here to introduce And She Could Be Next, the first part in a two-part documentary series streaming online as part of We Are One, a global film festival benefiting COVID-19 relief efforts around the world. Tribeca chose the World Health Organization as their charity. So if you're interested, you can donate on the series premiere on YouTube, which is starting this afternoon, 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 p.m. Pacific, at youtube.com/weareone. It is my honor to introduce to you Marj, Safinia, and Grace Lee, who both directed and produced And She Could Be Next, the story of a defiant movement of women of color transforming American politics from the ground up. As you are well aware, people around the world are probably watching what is happening in the United States right now. So it is an interesting time to be releasing and screening a film like this. Thank you, Marj and Grace, for joining us and sharing this important film with us.
Thanks, Bradford.
Thanks, Bradford. We're really excited to be here with a global audience to present our first part of our series. But first, given everything that's been going on the last few days, and I'm sure everyone is watching the news, we just want to acknowledge that Blackness and Black people are currently under violent attack in the United States. And as a film team, we affirm that Black lives matter. In fact, when you watch our series, you'll see that Black women have always been and are at the forefront of movements that advocate for justice for all of us.
Thanks, Grace. I think that, I think we all have heavy hearts this morning and have done over the last few days here in the United States. I know my friends from around the world, are texting me asking what is happening over there. And I think that in, what we've seen in the last few days is literally coast to coast, east to west, north to south, an outpouring of just no more, right? Enough. And I think that we have to understand that, when we say we are one, we taped a little promo ourselves to sort of help promote this screening, because we as a team are incredibly multicultural. We come from, all over the world. Many of us are immigrants. Many of us speak different languages. That's why we were so thrilled to reach the global audience. And the idea of We Are One is a lovely idea. And there are many of these kind of phrases that we use like that. But the truth is that out in the world and on the streets, we don't get treated as one. So we know that we all are entitled to the same respect and the same justice, the same access to opportunity. And the problem is the systems, right? The problem is that we live in systems that are not designed to be inclusive and not designed to see everyone equally. And I think that that's where, the story that we're trying to tell in And She Could Be Next matters in this moment, because we know that when our lawmakers, literally the people who get to write the laws, pick the police chiefs, appoint the judges, when these people come from a lived experience of what is now essentially the new American majority, then we will start to see justice happen at the systemic level, which is where it needs to happen. I know that there have been some conversations about people saying go out and vote, and other people saying this is more than just about voting. And of course it is more about voting, but voting is that one place where there is, as long as voter suppression isn't involved, which we do get to in part 2 of And She Could Be Next. But voting is the place where we can raise our voices and pick the people who represent us and know that their, sort of firsthand experience in the world will inform the way that they write legislation that protects us. And we think the women of color are the answer to the problem that America is facing right now.
Thank you, Marj. At the beginning of building the movement, you do have numerous shots of women of color being heard, pushing forth democracy. And then one of the early scenes has Rashida Tlaib and her younger son, Yusuf, says to her and asks her if she's going to be the next president. And the documentary goes from there. Could you tell us a bit about the documentary itself?
Sure. In And She Could Be Next, we are documenting a movement of women of color as candidates and organizers who are transforming American politics from the ground up. It's set during the 2018 midterm elections, which so far was the most, had ushered in the most diverse group of people into Congress and politics in our history. These are women who are rooted in community. They are women who are working to represent what we call the new American majority. In many parts of the country, it's already majority non-white, and that's just the reality that we're seeing. And I think some of the events that have been playing out are bearing witness to this as well. The film tracks several women in races big and small, ranging from Stacey Abrams running for governor of Georgia, Rashida Tlaib, Veronica Escobar, several women in Congress. We also have on the state and local level, Maria Elena Durazo here in Los Angeles running for state senate, and Bushra Amiwala, who is currently a college student who ran for her county commission. So we look at a wide breadth of women as candidates, but also, the organizers, the community organizers who are helping us get there, because it's not just about candidates, it's about a movement of people who are changing, communities and changing the way politics is done.
When you first set out to make this documentary, was there a thesis or an idea or something that particularly inspired you to act to create this documentary?
I mean, I think we're in this incredible tipping point moment in this country, right? We keep talking about this new American majority. In the youngest voting segment of America, the sort of 18 and I think it's 18 to 30-ish segment, this is already a population in this country that is majority not white, right? So we have to acknowledge that there's a changing face of America. And when we look at the gulf between what America looks like and what our elected officials look like, that gulf of representation is problematic. We live in a democracy, a representative democracy, right? So the person who represents you should have some connection to you, your experiences, and the struggles that you face. So that it was very motivating to understand that we're on the precipice of this real shift in the country. In many cities, it's already shifted. And they say by 2042, the country will have shifted entirely. So how do we fix it? At the governmental level in our leadership, but also how do we think more broadly about all our industries? I mean, Grace and I are, in the documentary industry, there's many more women who work in documentary than work in, fiction in Hollywood. But the majority of the stories that we tell about people in the world are still predominantly told by white men, so, and that's just our industry. At every boardroom, everywhere we need to have leadership that sees things differently. And so that for us is a really motivating factor because we are the new American majority, right? So this is our story too.
This is a story that is not often told because it couldn't be told before, but were there any challenges that you faced in making this, in getting it made, that sort of thing?
Lots of them. I mean, it's an epic American political story that for the first time really looks at race and gender, because as we see what's happening today, how can you tell a political story without talking about those two things? The biggest challenges, I think, were, we covered 6 different stories in geographic regions across the country: Texas, Georgia, Michigan, California. And, we had dynamic teams on the ground. We have multiple primaries happening at different times. One other thing I should mention, even though it was daunting, we had an incredible team of accomplished women of color field directors who are all, stellar people in our field, who closely matched, the backgrounds and experiences of the people whose stories we were telling. That was really important for us because, as we talk about representation, not just in government, it also, as Marge says, is important in who's telling these stories, who is documenting, who is letting us know what's happening on the ground. And that kind of access and that kind of lived experience matters from the storyteller's point of view as well.
In making this documentary, were there things that surprised you in a positive way, encouraged you, gave you momentum, and were there things that you found still discouraging?
Yes and yes. I mean, what was super encouraging and really fundamentally inspiring to us is wherever we were across the country, you would see young people coming out, and especially young girls, right? 14, 15. And they would be looking up at a podium, a sort of a position that is endowed with power in many, many ways, and seeing someone who looked like them. And you would almost be able to see the light bulb kind of go off in their heads, thinking this could be possible for me too, right? So the power of seeing and being seen was really, really inspiring to see everywhere. And Grace mentioned we have this young candidate we followed, Bushra Amiwala. She was 19 years old when we started to follow her. And she hadn't raised an enormous amount of money for her campaign. And her campaign was literally fueled by teenagers, you know? And to see these teenagers, most of them young Muslim women, totally like wrapped, you know, she was their rock star. And to see that now part of their formative experience is this idea that I too could be a politician when I turn 18 is phenomenal. That's so exciting to us. So I think that was what was surprising in the positive. And then I think what was surprising in the negative was just the extent of the voter suppression that we encountered in Georgia in the 2018 primary. Sort of shocking and laid kind of bare. And that, unfortunately, is a story you're going to have to tune into part 2 to see, which will be airing in the United States on public television on June 29th and 30th.
From the point of view of creating a documentary in cooperation with each other and directing, how did the both of you kind of seek to stay on the same page?
We literally stayed on the same Google Doc. We have Google Docs coming out of our ears. I think we were just, you know, actually, Grace, do you want to answer? I can, but if you have something.
I mean, you know, I think in any creative project, you seek out collaborators who, you know, sort of are going to, you know, it's like 2 brains is better than 1. And we actually have 3 brains, you know, we actually have multiple brains on this project, all the talented field directors, our editor, Julie, you know, our cinematographer. We have so many people, you know, who believed in the story we were telling. I think in particular with Marj, you know, it's not easy to co-direct, but I feel that we were on the same page from the beginning. And, you know, I mean, it's just nice to have, especially on a project so unwieldy, you know, to have, you know, a smart woman of color at the helm alongside you. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's in many ways, you know, I like making this project to our own political campaign, you know, like we're documenting women who are working on campaigns, but, you know, the idea that we could tell this, like I said before, an epic American political story from the point of view of women of color is in itself something that is a challenge for many people, you know, and to have collaborators who believe that and live it, you know, we live these lives, you know, in the United States, and we don't always see our stories. That is what kind of keeps us going, right?
In the context of making the documentary, what would you say that you learned that was new to you in kind of covering this?
I mean, I don't know if it was so new to me. I think that's part of the reason that both Grace and I work well on this is because truly we are kind of political junkies, both of us. But the idea that civic engagement is our collective responsibility, right? There's no pass from civic engagement. We create the world we live in. And that there's this idea that there's an organizer in all of us, right? Every single one of us has the ability to impact the people around us, to help demystify a process that can sometimes by design be created to make you feel disengaged, and to encourage each other to take ownership about the laws and decisions that affect our lives. So, you know, I'm signed up to, you know, all my elected representatives' emails. You know, I go to neighborhood meetings and I sit in weird rooms with fluorescent strip lighting and listen to long, boring, rambly things, because that's the place where the decisions happen, you know? And I feel like all of us, especially in this moment, when we look around this country right now, nobody's coming to save us, right? We're going to save ourselves. It is our responsibility to create the country and the world that we want to live in. And so the big takeaway is that, like, we can't sit on the sidelines. If we sit on the sidelines, we're going to get more of the same. And power is never ceded. We have to go out and claim the power for the world that we want to live in.
So in the context of what is happening in this country, what would you say is the ideal response for an audience watching your documentary?
Grace?
I mean, Marj just said there's an organizer in all of us. We don't all have to run for office. Like, I would never do that. That is not my thing. You know, my job is to tell stories and to, expose what's happening and shine a light on the kinds of injustice that we've been seeing in terms of voter suppression. Organizing is everything at this moment, like whether it's, figuring out how to get your vote by mail ballot, or whether it's, participating in a mutual aid network right now because of because of COVID-19, donating to the World Health Organization when our own president has decided to defund it. I mean, we make decisions every day, that affect our lives. I think it's our responsibility to really just lean into what your values are at this moment and act, not just, give lip service to what you think is right. This is the time to move, and this is the time to organize and to find allies, find collaborators, find a political home that's going to help you, be stronger as a group.
And I'll just add to that, Bradford, I know we're short on time, but we do have an incredibly important election happening in this country in November under extraordinary circumstances with COVID, which we expect will still be very much here in force in that time window. And we're going to have to work extra hard to be able to vote and to make sure that our votes are counted and to help the people around us do that. And there are no perfect candidates. I think that's why we have to disabuse ourselves of this idea that there's some savior that we're going to elect who's just going to wave a magic wand and our problems are going to away. That's just not how politics works. That's not how it works. We have to elect the better of two choices, and then we have to push them to, by our active civic participation, push them to be more responsive to our community needs. And it's as simple as that. And that's what our responsibility is, to fix the problems of this country and to put that in a positive frame to allow us all to experience equal opportunity and equal justice.
There are people watching today who have their own stories that they want to be telling. If there are people out there who are interested in the documentary format, in doing what you do, what would you say to them?
Don't rethink. It's hard. Documentary is a hard profession because it's terribly underfunded. And it takes many, many years of your life, and it's just a labor of love. So my first advice is, if you can do something else, do it. And if you can't do something else, I think Grace probably has some wisdom about how to start, right?
I mean, you find your people, right? Like, I'm so, we're journalists, documentary filmmakers, anyone documenting this moment are under attack right now. And we need to find people who are going to, support us, right? Like, I think what I said earlier about finding the right collaborators, finding the right team, some of us are going to just do this anyway because we love it and we can't help ourselves. And I know there are people out there who are thinking that too, like things are going on in your countries, that are just as unbelievable. It's important to document these things, but it's also important to do it, within a network and to have, people, keeping an eye out for you. I was just going to say, like, I was so heartened this morning looking at the photos of people in Germany, around the country who are protesting, saying Black Lives Matter. They're not in the United States. I mean, that gives me hope, right? I feel like it's going to take a movement. It's not just one of us. It's not a savior going to save us. It's a movement of all of us.
And to wrap it up nicely and bring it back to the idea of we are one, we really are one. I mean, if this pandemic has shown us anything, we're deeply interconnected, right? There's no such thing as over there. Over there is over here, and over here is over there. And we share these struggles. And, you know, we really have to support people outside of our countries too. We all just want justice. We all just want peace. We all want our children to prosper and have a better life than us. We want to be able to go to school, to go to work, to, you know, have a decent life. That's all anybody in the world wants. And that's where our common humanity really is the same, regardless of what package you come in. And really, I think that's the big takeaway from this moment we're in.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Grace and Marge, for spending some time with us.
Thank you, Bradford.
And thank you to our audience watching at home. And She Could Be Next, Part 1, Building the Movement, will be streaming for free on YouTube for 48 hours from 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 p.m. Pacific. Its premiere as part of We Are One, this global film festival benefiting COVID-19 relief efforts around the world. You can watch both the first and second parts on the PBS series POV on June 29th and 30th. Thank you again so much for your time, and please enjoy the festival.
Thank you.